So let's talk about sustainable, inclusive business. All right. The business community is getting into something what they want to call producers' responsibility in the shift towards a circular economy in Kenya. So, following the successful development and launch of the extended producer responsibility business model in mid October by the Kenya Association of Manufacturers in partnership with a sustainable inclusive business under the KEPSA Foundation, which is supported by the Dutch Embassy, the roadmap will provide, a lot of work that they are doing on bringing about extended producer responsibility and the producer responsibility organization that's then going to be formed. And it's basically just talking about how then our business is going to be performing with this. Is the organization being at the forefront of shifting into a circular economy? What is a circular economy? What does it mean?
I have
Some of
that
these terms,
question
and
as
this is
well.
where the businesses now come in and they say, all right, so we are getting into this new model. We want to be more responsible in the way we do our business. This initiative called the Sustainable Business Initiative, or Sustainable Inclusive Business, is looking at how do we make sure that we are responsible even in our business. There's issues of climate change. There's issues of looking at employee relations. There's issues of looking at how you as a business are behaving, or as a corporate you're conducting yourself. There's the issue of taking care of the environment in which you work. There's the issue, all those coming together then form this whole inclusive, sustainable inclusive business initiative. So when they have the extended producer responsibility, it's to what extent does the producer responsibility go?
What I'm hearing here is that all these standards currently are not being met, or they don't exist. So we either want to create them, and if they do exist in whatever form, we want to revamp them to meet, not just meet, but to be in line with the challenges that we're currently facing. And the major challenge is, of course, the economic downturn that has been brought about by the COVID-19. Now, I am not clear about where we stand where these things are concerned, because to improve on something, there's perhaps a need to understand where are we currently. What is it that requires revamping or improving? And yes, we are getting assistance from people who probably have gone through this and have known how to overcome it. The vital question: what is the twist that is going to ensure that it is tailor-made for the circumstances that we are in, and that it will actually produce the desired results? Those are the questions that come to my mind.
So let's bring in the business side of the country into this conversation, and the two leading organizations that are, business membership organizations that bring in the private sector join us today. Phyllis Wakiaga is the Chief Executive Officer of the Kenya Association of Manufacturers. And let's also have a conversation with Amadi Ebeneza. He's a Program Manager for Sustainable Inclusive Business at the Kenya Private Sector Alliance. Good morning, Phyllis and Amadi.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Derek.
Good morning.
Welcome to the Situation Room. It's great to have you on the show this morning. I'm just going to start straight up with you, Phyllis. What is the extended producer responsibility in a language that all of us can understand? Because you guys know what you're talking about, but Ebu, tell us, what does it mean?
Thank you for that question. The extended producer responsibility is basically saying that a manufacturer's responsibility for their product extends for the entire product life cycle. So basically, when a manufacturer produces a product, his responsibility extends to the post-consumer waste. So the journey around this started in about the year 2018, when the industry came together around the PET bottle. At that time, it was to see how we can have extended producer responsibility around the PET bottles. I think you know those bottles, the ones where we package water, soft drinks, and other products.
Yep.
So at that time, we formed PETCO, which is a model that borrows heavily from the South African industry for management of PET bottles. So what happens is that the manufacturers who utilize the PET bottles, those who manufacture it, are responsible and really are working to ensure that those bottles are collected, recycled, and reused. So what we are basically trying to do is to move as a country from a linear economy where a lot of our waste ends up in landfills, but utilize instead this waste as a resource and something that can be used in another cycle of production. So the bottles, for example, are reused, they can make pellets, they can be used to make other products. So that way you're having a circular economy as opposed to a linear economy where in the past you take a bottle or a plastic or a metal and throw it away. So you're extending the life cycle of products.
What prompted the business community to come up with this model? I mean, why? What's in it for you? Once you've produced, as you've been doing before, you sell, and then the market then does that, and maybe a new segment of the market is born. Why does a producer of, let's say, plastic have the responsibility of going all the way to collecting it and to finding other uses for it?
The business community and industry is very cognizant of the fact that we live in this environment and we have to contribute to a sustainable environment. So as responsible businesses, what we are doing is trying to ensure we play our part. We create awareness. We provide a platform that creates the opportunity for us to reuse our products so that we minimize the impact and the negative impacts to the economy. So I believe it's the responsibility of all of us as individuals, as businesses, to do that. So that is what prompted it. What is in it for us, therefore, is a better environment for all of us and sustainable business, because at the end of the day, if someone is not doing this, what eventually happens in different countries that you'll see bans of products, you'll see waste in the economy, will affect our ocean. So the impact is quite broad. So businesses are acting as responsible citizens to go the next step and ensure that their waste is properly managed in the environment.
I mean, going to you, Ebenezer, can we see that there is congruence then amongst businesses to say that we know that this is important? Also take into consideration the fact that it could be businesses leading this initiative, but that the general greater population also is involved in this as well, to a very large extent. How do you intend on bringing in Kenyans into this, basically?
Thank you so much, indeed, for the question. Of course, every business, as Phyllis mentioned, is operating in an environment. What I like to call, if you zero it down to the 3 P's: people, planet, and profit. So the people that work in the organizations themselves, they have to take care of them. They have to look at the planet, which is the environment, and the bottom line, which is the profit. All of these elements then will define sustainability. So if you talk about sustainability, you're not talking about one part of it. You're talking about the holistic view. And to make it simple, I call it the 3 Ps. Now, businesses, in this sense, then look at avenues to ensure that their products that introduced to the market, it does not, again, negate what has the environmental sustainability. So they like to redesign their products so that they ensure when this product goes to the market, it's able to be recycled. So again, adopting what we call circularity, what Phyllis was mentioning. So the linear economy defines that a product is developed, you use it, and then you dispose of after using that particular product. But within the circular economy, it states that you first of all refuse those items that are hazards to the environment. That's by not using them. If you use a product, then you reuse it and then recycle it. There's an element that we call recovery of energy, and lastly, disposal. So the government, again, in its policies, aims to achieve only 5% of waste to be disposed in landfills. So reducing the amount of trash or waste that goes to landfills and adopting circularity.
Is there any organization in Kenya that has attempted or has done what you're actually saying?
Yes, quite a number. Many of our members within KEPSA, Kenya Private Sector Alliance, and Kenya Association of Manufacturers are doing it. An example that I will give you is Unilever. you'll find that what they're doing is some of their products, their packaging, they have particular products that they're using recycled plastics. This is in collaboration with a company called Mr. Green. I don't know if you've heard of it. So Mr. Green Africa works with informal waste pickers. They actually bring these products to them, and they're able to break it down and then convert it into a product. So these are the elements that we are talking about. Now, circularity does not only look at one sector, which is possibly looking at a product like plastic. It is holistic. When I talk about circularity, it's in all sectors. Let's go into the agricultural sector. We talk about food, nutrition, and security. Again, then we must ensure that the products that we grow, then we reduce waste, or we kind of through the process of production we use the byproducts to generate other products. If I use an example of the water sector, they currently use sludge to develop briquettes and pellets. Yeah, so that's part of circularity in itself. So instead of burning away the residues, you use it again. There are two actually products that you can make from sludge, which is manure, fertilizer, or you can actually develop the briquettes or pellets. So that's energy again, trying to reduce the use of charcoal again. So that again impacts on the element of us talking about we need to reach the 10% coverage of forests in Kenya.
Okay, and Phyllis, are we focusing just on Kenyan companies, or are we also looking at foreign companies? Because we already know that Kenya is a dumping ground for some of these wastes that come from other countries. We know that already, and so that even as Kenyan companies come together to do this, is it taking into consideration what foreign companies might be doing in the country as well?
Yes, what the plan is seeking to do is to set together a producer responsibility organization. So what the organization will do is that it will look at increasing the collection and recycling of these products, also raising awareness on sourcing of products to ensure that the products being sourced are also environmentally friendly. It will also look at the issue of product design and how we develop products for recyclability. So the manufacturers and also importers will have to be part of this, will be members, to ensure that we are achieving those goals together. So in partnership with the Ministry of Environment and Forestry, we have signed something called a framework of cooperation, where we monitor how the PRO is going to be implemented. That's the Producer Responsibility Organization, and other commitments around what we are going to do to reduce waste in the environment. So it will not only be for Kenyan companies, it will also be for importers, users, manufacturers, because it's a whole cycle. It's also about how we dispose. It's about the consumer, me and you, at household level, how we separate and segregate our waste.
Right.
So it involves everyone.
Okay. You talked about implementation policy, and I think here is the crux of the matter, because we can say all these things, but in terms of implementation, that's where the rubber meets the road. And how do we make sure that these things will actually come to be? Because I'm looking at examples of other countries. They don't. Some of them don't play about these policies. What you bring in, how you operate when it comes to circular business that you're talking about, it's very clear, and in the implementation, nobody plays around with it. And as we are here, we've seen that many times the issue is we might have a beautiful policy, but the implementation is where things seem to stall. So how are we going to make sure, how are you making sure with this alliance of these companies that the implementation will actually occur?
Firstly, I think just to mention that as a country, we are actually quite ahead in terms of the development in this space. We borrowed heavily from the Danish industries when we developed the KEPRI, or the Kenya Producer Responsibility Organization. And when you look at even how far we've gone in terms of setting up the PRO and the speed we've moved with, even some of the developed countries have not done this. But you're right, the rubber hits the road where implementation is concerned. The government has also, in line with this, developed Extended Producer Responsibility Regulations 2020. They are currently undergoing public participation, and when this is done, we'll be able to then have a legal regulatory framework that ensures that they are implemented. So that would be the move. But beyond that, also it's personal responsibility for organizations, for citizens to rise up to the occasion to ensure that we're also playing our part in implementation of this regulation.
How will this PRO be structured, or how is it being structured? Is it voluntary membership? Is it that every organization that, say, is joins KAM or joins KEPSA then automatically becomes a part of PRO?
The PRO initially started as a voluntary initiative. As you heard, we set up the PETCO one in 2018. When the regulations come into place, it will not be voluntary. There are certain waste streams that have been identified in the regulations, and for those waste streams, it will be required that the manufacturers of those products and those value chains have in place a producer responsibility organization. So that is the reason why we have set up that Kenya Producer Responsibility Organization. We have members who have already signed up to it, and then the different waste streams will then be managed. So, for example, the bread manufacturers and the manufacturers of bread packaging are already actively involved. So that's something you're going to see in the waste streams that have been included within the Extended Producer Responsibility Regulation.
Okay, in this organization, does the scope extend to the agricultural sector? Why I ask this question is because in the past few days, in fact, as of last week, there have been issues that have been raised with the eating of the tomatoes and pesticides that are used in tomatoes that can be poisonous. Now, if I extend the argument to other agricultural products, do you have members who also will employ the very same strategies that we are now talking about in the agricultural sector to ensure that whatever is produced from the time, anything that is involved in that chain of production of agricultural goods adhere to these norms?
This responsibility, as we said, is something that's going to extend across industry, and it's going to change the way we do business and the move to responsible, sustainable business and looking at the broader circular economy. So even the agricultural sector cannot be left out of this because, as you've said, there are impacts. And Ebenezer even gave specific examples of how the agricultural sector is part of the circular economy. So you're going to see a lot of shifts in terms of businesses being more conscious about the SDGs, about sustainability and their responsibilities in society.
Amadi,
just to throw a little bit on that particular comment from Phyllis, the question that City Muga asked. I'd like to separate the two because what Muga was talking about is traceability of products to the farm.
Yes.
So to be able to understand what kind of products were used when this, you talked about the tomatoes were being grown.
Yes.
Is it safe for consumption? So that's the traceability, and that's in the agricultural sector. However, as Phyllis mentioned, circularity extends to all these sectors. She talked about metals, she talked about plastics, she talked about agricultural films. So all that, you'll see that it spreads across all other sectors. So I just wanted to clarify that so that even as our listeners are listening, they're able to understand the difference between traceability, what C.T. Muga was talking about, and the external producer responsibility regulations.
All right. When we talk about responsibilities, thank you, Amadi. Let me just extend my question. Do you also consider quantities and the sustainability to meet the desired needs of the individuals? Again, with reference to the agricultural sector. Essentially, I'm talking about food security.
Quantities in terms of, sorry?
I'm saying, or rather I am asking, that if we take this argument to the agricultural sector and we talk about production, when we talk about production, you are in essence talking about food security. How then, or does your organization also ensure that food security is included in this back-to-back system that we have been talking about?
Yes, so within the Kenya Private Sector Alliance, we have different, what we call sector and we have members within those groups that I would like to picture them or with ministries. For example, the Ministry of Agriculture and the sector of agriculture that you're talking about. Now, production comes in hand in terms of, and food security comes in terms of reducing of food loss. So when we are looking at the adoption of technology, as well as looking at the different types of input that the farmers are able to use, in that sense, then it contributes to food nutrition and security. We have been lobbying also for the reduction of taxes on inputs again. So this again touches on sustainability in the agriculture sector. That touches upon the question that you asked on quantities. I think that you're talking about production.
In the room this and every morning is Eric Latif, CT Muga Nduoko, and joining us on the line is the CEO of the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, Phyllis Wakiaga, and the Program Manager for Sustainable Inclusive Business at the Kenya Private Sector Alliance, Ebenezer Amadi. We are talking about creating a circular economy and extended producer responsibility. And the organizations that are members of these two associations are committing themselves to make sure that they participate in this in terms of sustainability. And Phyllis, I want to just come to you. When I listen to what then the companies are committing to do, and even in the setting up of the producer responsibility organization, there's going to be a cost element to it, because you're talking about following through the product or the service to the consumer and then seeing how that is then included in the entire sustainability or circularity of the economy. There is a cost element to it. Who's going to bear these costs? Are you committing to bear the cost, or is it going to be passed on to the consumer?
Thank you for that question. There is a cost element to it, and that's why business is coming together to do this jointly, because you can imagine if each company was trying to set up its own producer responsibility. However, when companies come together, when the different stakeholders are working together, all the way from the producers, the manufacturers, I think we'll be able to look at that cost. However, there's also incentives that come from government that support processes like this. For example, if you looked at the budget proposals last year and the outcomes, there was the issue of the income tax incentive that had been given around plastic waste recycling. So it's important that we look at extending that to other waste like glass and metal. So that's important. And also looking at the cost of doing business for the waste stakeholders. That's another way where we can bring down the cost because a lot of the players, especially in the recycling sector, in the informal economy, and they play a crucial role within this value chain. So if we can look at reducing the cost of doing business for them, also the movement of these products from around the country for recycling, helping to also reduce the cost of machinery brought into the country for recycling. So all these initiatives will also be required to bring down the cost of compliance around this area.
I mean, and this is a question for both of you. It seems that there must be a lot of end-user engagement throughout this entire process. And I'm still going to go back to that because you can come as companies and decide that we're going to make sure we can do everything that we can do to make sure that businesses are sustainable then when it comes to waste and things like this. But we still have a very trash dumping heavy culture whereby it's not a priority for people. So how then do you intend to weave between this conclusion to do this and then the culture of where we still have people who are dumping waste? Or are you saying taking on the full responsibility of no matter where it's dumped, we're going to take that on and still deal with it?
Thank you so much for the question, Liz. So when you asked the question, I was getting excited to answer the question, and I was reminded of one of my supervisors when I was working for a different organization. She was called Nancy Ndirangu. And if you're in the vehicle and someone throws away a bottle, she will tell the driver to stop, go back, and ask you to go outside the car and pick the bottle and come back with it. So that's part of awareness creation as well. I was just using that as an example. So as the Kenya Private Sector Alliance and with the Sustainable Inclusive Business, what we've been doing is to increase awareness of separation of waste at source. There's an initiative that we're doing and we're implementing in Mombasa with the acronym COAST, which in full is creating opportunities and alleviating poverty through sustainable trade. So we have realized in the informal settlements that there is no really a structured way for people to dispose of their trash.
Yep.
So what happens is that the informal waste pickers come together into a group and then collect the trash and drop it anywhere and make a dump site. But the Mombasa county government is working closely with us. They have developed a policy that basically maps out where the collection recovery centers should be, and then work with the informal waste pickers as well as the larger collectors, so to speak, to transport this trash to the recovery facilities and at the end dump sites. So if you look at the National Waste Management Policy, it actually puts the awareness creation as one of the critical elements that should have a focus on, because increased awareness then contributes to something that is called behavior change, through behavior change communication, right? So if you, the other time when you're having a discussion about this, I gave you an example on your kitchen, right? You don't have different bins for plastic, paper, and food waste. You just put them all together. And what happens is that it makes it difficult for the recyclers to recover the material when you put it in that way. But if you are aware that you can separate these items, it makes it easy even for recovery, right? And recycling of these products, or reuse for that matter. If you had a packaging or a carrier bag that you use, let's say, for example, like Kiondo, and you put it aside, you can reuse it. But if you to use the Kiondo and put all the trash inside, including the food waste, then someone will not be motivated to use it to go and do some shopping, right? So that's the kind of change that you want to influence, actually engaging the public in this case.
But when I think about this and I hear you talking about all the things, I'm also getting worried that at some point then business may end up doing the job that the government should be doing. And this is waste management. Where do you draw the line and say that this is a role that the governments, let's say the county governments, should be performing in terms of, waste disposal, waste management? And then at what point does then the private sector come in when it comes to the sustainable inclusive business?
A good question, Eric. So when you read through the what Phyllis was calling the Extended Producer Responsibility Regulation, but in full it's called the Environmental Management Coordination (into brackets Extended Producer Responsibility Regulations 2020), it basically breaks this down and says that this organization shall be established, and then you'll have the private sector becoming members of it, and then contribute an annual fee, which will be calculated in terms of, is your product easy to recover or is it hard to recycle, and how much quantities then do you introduce to the market. So all these factors then will contribute to the fee that the private sector entities will be contributing. Now, the county governments have a role to play in terms of providing a service on collection, transportation, treating, and also disposal of waste. So this is an obligation that is not being pushed to the private sector. The county government will actually should provide this service. I will not say will, because it's dependent on the counties as well and the work the governors do.
Yeah.
So they should provide this service. And you will find that in the regulation it actually says that the extended producer responsibility or the producer responsibility organization will collaborate with the county government. There is also the bit that talks about public-private partnership, them being able to bring in investors, because waste management is quite capital intensive. It requires huge resources for you to be able to make some impact in the county setting. So each party has a role to play, and it is defined in these regulations and the policy as well. The national government also has a role to play in guiding us in terms of policy development and stating that these are the priority areas for us as a country. There is something that is called adoption of the zero waste, which means that you're supposed to reduce wastage. So it also touches on the agriculture sector, and CT was talking about the agriculture sector and reducing food loss so that you're able to increase food security in the country.
When we're talking about the responsibility of the county government, I have to ask, what has your organization done to ensure that they're not only fully cognizant of the role they need to play, but the importance of this role that they are expected to play?
Now, one of the things that we do is having conversations with them. For example, I gave an example of how we are collaborating together with Mombasa County, working closely with the Department of Environment, Energy, Natural Resources. So what happens is that when you're having the discussions with the CEC, we also critically look at what is their role as a county to play and what is our role as the private sector, as well as the programs that we are implementing. And they're very keen, case example of Mombasa County. You can talk about other counties as well. They're very keen on also involving the private sector to come in and invest. So there's an opportunity to invest also in the private sector, right? So in as much as they have this obligation, they have the opportunity to invite in the private sector to invest in the sector. Because again, as I mentioned, sometimes the allocation of budget to the waste management is a bit low compared to other sectors. There is something that the policy, National Sustainable Waste Management Policy, looks at and talks about the allocation of resources in this particular sector. It's quite low. So there's only much they can do with the resources that are available. But with the conversation that we have with them, they are happy to include innovations, happy to work with the informal sectors, and also mapping out the dumping sites and trying to invest in recovery centers. So having these conversations with them also helps them to set priorities, right? Because sometimes each county government has their own priority, but when you're having this conversation, they're like, okay, so waste management is also a key thing that we can focus on and try to increase the budget. It's not that it's not a priority, but in a home, if you have your budget,
it's not a pain point. I mean, they don't get this pressure from the people because we have gotten so used to doing their job for them that they don't actually feel that it's their job anymore. And this is where I see the red flags, and I want to direct this question to you, Phyllis. So you have the producer responsibility organization that then will come into force, and every organization will be mandated to become a member of this, where you'll be contributing some money so that you can ensure that there is the circularity, as you're calling it. Then there's the county government, which is, and you're saying with the regulations and the policy, the county government and the national government and their role in waste disposal management. As we've seen in some cases, there has been talk by some county governments of bringing in a private sector player to organize their waste management. So can you imagine a point where there's a private sector that's been mandated by a county government to run its waste management and disposal, and then there's the PBO, the PRO, which is a membership organization, which is also playing in the same sector. Clashes between these two in terms of business and what they're supposed to be doing. How would you deal with those kind of clashes? Or am I not just
Thank
reading
thank you for that.
a wrong flag? That's not too red.
Just to mention that, first of all, the county government sees a lot of work happening also at KAM level with a number of counties where we have presence, Nairobi, Kiambu, Mombasa, Kisumu, and others, and even Nakuru. We are doing a lot in terms of working with the county governments to raise awareness and also to look at the opportunity that is in waste. We have a partnership, for example, with Taka Nimali, which is about waste as well. So we are able to coordinate and look at the different youth groups and how they can harness the opportunities around this space of recycling. Yes, I agree with you that with the different players, there's going to be need for serious coordination so that it's clear what role everyone is playing, because I believe the county government has their role to play in terms of collection and coordinating around that space. The national government also has its role to play around the national environmental policies, and the private sector has their role. So everyone will be coming together in the form of a PPP. And in order to make this even clearer, one of the things we need to do is to have a very clear policy and bill. We have the National Sustainable Waste Management Policy and Bill that has been undergoing discussions over a period of time. And it will be important that this is actually passed, because it does what you're saying. It provides clearly what everyone's responsibility will be. And that way we are able to coordinate better and reduce any chances of clashes between the different players within this space. So this bill is something that needs to be prioritized in the policy, because it will provide a very clear outline of what everyone is required to do. And that way you'll then see national government, county governments, the private sector, business community coordinating much better around this space.
So you would say there's definite buy-in from the state, from the government, into this project, into this idea, and is it being taken as on the priority list? Because we know that there's a long list on the priority list. Is it up there in terms of how then they would follow through with the buy-in?
There is buy-in at government level. I won't speak on their behalf to say whether it's a top priority, but it's indicative from the conversations we have with the Ministry of Environment and Forestry that this is something that they are prioritizing so that we have a cleaner and a better environment. So if you look at the fact that they already have a bill, they have the EPI regulations that have quickly been turned around after we worked together with KEPSA on the Plastics Action Plan. So within a course of a year, we've seen the EPI regulations come through. So those actions demonstrate that there is a commitment at national government level. Okay. Also with the engagements with counties, you do see that. What we would like to see then is more resources allocated towards this space, so that we also are able to build better waste infrastructure around the country for management of solid waste, because that one does require quite a good number of resources allocated. So the priority will also follow when the resources are also allocated towards this.
Amadi, there has been discussions and talks about the effects of plastics on marine life on the planet. And there are those who estimate that something like 100 tons of plastic are in our oceans right around the world. There are even studies that have been done which show that we human beings, we think of the fish alone as consuming or being influenced adversely by the plastics, but human beings, again, it has been studied and shown, also consume microplastics that go to the tune of 39,000 to 52,000 particles per year. Now, if I were to believe these studies, then I would say you have your work cut out for you, don't you?
True.
Okay.
Thank you so much, William, CT. Now, if I was to bring this home, as you mentioned, and bring it to a person who's listening in from the Vihiga County, when I was growing up, you would actually see cow eating the packaging of plastic. And at some point, I remember we were trying to discourage the cows to eat the plastic by introducing chili into it and observe the reaction of the cow. So the next time it looks at the plastic, it changed its behavior and decided not to eat this plastic. So what I'm trying to say is that, yes, plastic has become quite dangerous for animals if we dispose of it in an improper manner. And if you look at Nairobi and other areas of the upstream, then that means that if we dispose it in an improper manner, then the rivers carry these plastics and packages into the Indian Ocean. We have also seen that you find that the fish or other the fish or other in the ocean
Marine.
get entangled, right, with the kind of plastic that are introduced. So it's upon us then to find out how best to dispose of the plastic and make use of it. As we were having a discussion, I think the last time, it's 2 months ago, we said that plastics are actually important to some extent because of the element of us using it to handle, let's say, food. So there's hygiene level to it. We gave an example of sugarcane. So we have seen as well success in implementation of some of the bans that have been introduced to about 80%, if I give an example of the plastic carrier bags. However, we also see that there are some scrupulous businessmen who try to bring in the plastics. So this is a challenge as well. But disposal is a critical thing if we were to look at the sustainability of the environment and taking advantage of the products that we have all at the same time.
Phyllis and Amadi, we want to thank you very much for speaking to us. Phyllis Wakiaga is the CEO of the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, and Ebenezer Amadi is the Program Manager for Sustainable Inclusive Business at the Kenya Private Sector Alliance. Asanteni sana, and we wish you all the best. I mean, like Siti said, you basically have your work cut out for you.
Yeah, thank you so much,
you.
Siti, Muga, Eric, and do. As the wise words of Siti Muga, I'll make sure to brush my teeth so that when I take my breakfast, I'll say breakfast in Kasar.
Well, there you go.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Have a lovely day.
You too.
Thank
Have a
you.
good one.